Hello everyone, it's me, Clayton. I just got back from watching Us by Jordan Peele and starring Lupita Nyong'o and Winston Duke. Now, Jordan Peele has already proven himself to be a very well done director when it comes to how he shoots horror films, how he writes his characters, and how he gets his messages across. If you've ever seen Get Out, you know that he really surprised a lot of us back then. But now with his next horror film, Us, it not only explores different messages and has a different overall style, but it still manages to get a lot of creepy horror vibes from it while still being a generally entertaining and often funny film that manages to have that perfect mix of comedy, horror, and suspense. But let's get to the story, shall we? The story is about Adelaide Wilson, played by Lupita Nyong'o, who, after having a traumatic experience in her past, goes back to the beach house that she grew up in with her husband, played by Winston Duke, and her son and her daughter. She's unfortunately rattled by PTSD and thinking that something awful is going to happen. And sure enough, four strangers end up at her house, and they happen to look exactly like her family. Well, not exactly, but you get the picture. But that's all I'll say about the story without spoiling anything. So, what I liked a lot about this film is how, even though it has a lot of horror elements, it still finds some time for some well done comedy, even mixed in with the creepy scenes. A lot of it comes from Winston Duke, who's a very comedic actor by nature, and he often gets a lot of laughs out of me. But I think all the characters get at least one moment that had me laughing out loud when I wasn't clutching onto my chair in suspense. There are several pop culture references, several bits of witty dialogue. There's several misunderstandings. Stuff that feels natural in this setting, and it doesn't come across as distracting. On top of that, the horror elements that are presented here are done very well. The strangers that enter the house are really, they're not overtly terrifying, but they're definitely unsettling. And that definitely comes through in both their mannerisms, how they speak, and how they move around and how they do things. They definitely feel non-human in a way, which I think was definitely the idea. Not as far as serial killer villains, but more in the sense that they feel almost alien, like they don't know how to act like normal people. It really gets across not only the intrigue of exactly who these people are and why they're here, and it also just makes for some really creepy moments. And even the awkwardness that they sometimes have plays into the creepiness. So it's the sense of the uncanny valley actually working with the horror. On top of that, I think the musical selections throughout the film were very good. They as expected in the trailer, they managed to turn "I've Got Five on It" into a surprisingly legitimately terrifying track, but they also use other songs to great effect, especially even using an NWA song for a really rollicking scene that I was not expecting. I won't spoil what song it is, but you'll know it when you hear it. The violence in the film it doesn't feel overly stylized, but it definitely feels brutal and it fits very well with the horror throughout. Uh, the, there's definitely a lot of blood, and there's definitely a lot of weapons being used. There's not a lot of guns. There's mostly a lot of close quarters combat, so it definitely feels more like a survival horror game than, say, an action film. And I think it works well that way, being up close and personal. The messages in the film, I won't spoil them, but let's just say you need to pay attention to a lot of things early on, because there's a lot of foreshadowing throughout the early portions of the film that lead into the film's messages near the end. And if you're paying attention throughout, you might be able to catch a few of the twists before they actually happen, though the twists that do come around are legitimately clever, and I do think they wrap the film up pretty well. Last thing I'll say is the ending. Again, not spoiling it, but I think it was a very clever ending, and it actually happens to mix in some really dark vibes in with its with the satisfying conclusion that was presented. So overall, Us is a horror film that I absolutely recommend to anyone who saw Get Out, or anyone who just wants to have a creepy but also funny good time. I give Us a 9.5 out of 10. See you next time.